The head of the FBI, Christopher Wray, for the first time, saying that he is working with the Attorney General to determine what the heck the FBI was doing, snooping around the Trump campaign in 2016. Did the FBI spy on innocent Americans? Well, in typical D.C. fashion, the politicians are getting all bogged down in semantics. Because apparently, it all comes down to what you actually are meaning by the definition of spying, right? Knowing that the FBI got themselves a FISA warrant in a secret FISA court to listen to the phone conversation of a Trump campaign aide, when it's abundantly clear in that Mueller report that there was no collusion, there was never any collusion with the Russians. Well, I just say it's fair to ask if the FBI was in fact spying, and I use that word, spying on that aide and the Trump campaign. And I use the term spying because I'm truly perplexed that our FBI would treat opposition research like it's some kind of gospel. Never vet it. Never tell the FISA court judge that it was bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign. And yes, there is a difference between to spy and to surveil. And that's tonight why the Democrats are so darn scared, as they should be. So here we go. The Oxford definition of the verb to spy is to work for a government or other organization by secretly obtaining information about enemies or competitors. In other words, you don't necessarily believe anyone is doing anything bad, but you do want to know what they're actually doing and what's going on, so you spy on them. If the Obama FBI department knew that that dossier was fake, and I think they did, and they misrepresented that report to a FISA court judge, then yes, they spied. Now, compare the verb to spy with the definition of to surveil, which means to keep a person under surveillance, which brings us to surveillance, which is defined as the following: the act of carefully watching a person suspected of a crime. Okay, so that's the nuance here. That's the nuance that Senator Shaheen went back and studied after being so astounded that Attorney General Barr answered her question like this. Remember?
You're not suggesting, though, that spying occurred.
I don't, I guess you could, I think there's spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur.
Whew, oh dear. She walked right into that one, right? She's the one who brought up spying. So today, Senator Shaheen got the opportunity to, I don't know, redeem herself with her party. And she actually tried to use these definitions to get Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, to effectively just knock his whole division. Watch.
I'd like to follow up on Senator Moran's question about the hearing we had with Attorney General Barr, because I was very concerned by his use of the word spying, which I think is a very loaded word. It conjures a criminal connotation.
It's just a reminder here, Senator. From the great state of New Hampshire, you're the one that introduced the word spying. The Attorney General just agreed with you. Anyway, let's continue. Here we go. Remember, if you're spying, it's because you just want to spy. You don't actually believe there's any underlying crime. Watch.
I'd appreciate a yes or no answer if possible. When FBI agents conduct investigations against alleged mobsters, suspected terrorists, other criminals, do you believe that they're engaging in spying when they're following FBI investigative policies and procedures?
Well, that's not the term I would use.
Thank you. So I would say that's a no to that question.
Well, I mean, look, there are lots of people have different colloquial phrases. I believe that the FBI is engaged in investigative activity, and part of investigative activity includes surveillance activity of different shapes and sizes. And to me, the key question is making sure that it's done by the book, consistent with our lawful authorities.
Okay, so there you go. After all that, sometimes it's just coming down to someone using a colloquial phrase. However, I think there's more to it. I think the Attorney General knew exactly what he was saying. He knows the difference between spying and surveilling. And when he said he's concerned that spying happened, he has every reason to be concerned. Our question tonight is whether or not the Obama FBI department was most definitely listening in to a Trump campaign phone call or two or three or many more, not because they believed that Donald Trump was an agent of Russia. That was just an excuse, right? It was because they wanted to know what was going on. They didn't believe there was any underlying crime. They just wanted to know what was going on. And that, if we go back to the dictionary, is the definition of spying. Joining me right now, Strategic Communications Director for the Trump 2020 campaign, Mr. Marc Lotter. Marc, good to have you back.
Thanks for having me, Trish.
So, we're splitting hairs over whether it was spying or surveilling, but, at the end of the day, if you are listening in on phone conversations because you got a FISA warrant that maybe you never should have gotten because you were using information that had never been vetted, that had never been verified, and was provided to you by opposition research for the other candidate, then I don't know. I think that's spying.
I think it meets that textbook definition. And to even go further, let's remember that just here in the last few days or so, we saw some more text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page where they were suggesting that the CIA was possibly involved. And look, when I hear about the CIA, the first thing I think about is spying.
Yeah, because that's kind of like what CIAs are. The CIA agents are, right? Spies. I mean, again, colloquial. Let's be clear. It's just a colloquial term. But, what I was getting at in this definition here is that I think that Jeanne Shaheen, again, senator from the great state of New Hampshire, born and raised, live free or die, she was trying to get at something there with the term spying. Maybe she didn't quite know what she was walking into, but she anticipated perhaps he would say, no spying, maybe surveilling. But in fact, he said, yeah, there was spying, and I think he has reason to do so. We have learned today, sir, that in fact this thing is going to get a whole lot bigger. Let's listen to what Christopher Wray said about how he's working with the Attorney General. Here we go.
I've had a number of conversations, and I'm working to help the Attorney General get to the bottom of an understanding of what the circumstances surrounding the initiation of that investigation were at the Department and the FBI back in 2016.
Okay, so he wants to get to the bottom of things. I mean, Americans want to get to the bottom of things. The Democrats still think that there's something else to get to the bottom of because they haven't figured out that the whole no collusion is actual reality. Apparently, they don't read the Mueller report. But that said, sir, where is this going? Where does it head? How far does it get? Is the Attorney General working with the FBI and Inspector General Horowitz to come up with something that may launch a whole other investigation?
I think we're about to find out, Trish, from what we're reading in media reports is that the Inspector General is expected to release his report by the end of the month, possibly, which looks into how the FBI, the Department of Justice, conducted themselves at the beginning of this investigation and whether they were forthcoming with the FISA court, whether they were using and aware that the dossier was just dirty opposition research paid for by Hillary Clinton. This is where the treachery of the Democrats is going to become to bear, and the American public are going to find out about it.
Can I jump in for a second and just point out one thing that struck me as just outrageous and pretty egregious? It was the idea that Baker, who was the attorney that was supposed to present these cases on behalf of the FBI to the FISA court, he never even bothered to check any of this. He just assumed that, everybody dotted their I's and crossed the T's, and he never checked any of this or vetted anything himself. So the idea that that dossier could have been used, again, opposition research could have been used as legitimate FBI intelligence is just, it really shows you how compromised we are, frankly, Marc, don't you think?
You're absolutely right. And again, let's take this out of presidential politics. We have to remember the power of the government was used to spy on an American citizen. And if FBI officials or Justice Department officials abused their authority or misled a court to do it, that is a fundamental breakdown of our rights, and it cannot be allowed to stand.
No, it can't. It is a breakdown of all our rights and everything we hold dear. Marc, thank you very much. Good to have you.
Thanks, Trish.